Running a hotel has always been more than just a job for me. It was my vocation, my world, my unshakable coordinate system, where everything was under my control. Every guest was part of a carefully tuned mechanism, and nothing went beyond the routine. But as soon as he appeared on the threshold, this balance began to collapse, like a light structure from a house of cards in a sudden gust of wind. He entered the hall with the confident gait of a man accustomed to the fact that the world adapts to him, that doors open for him by themselves, and people smile, not realizing that they are already under his charm. Tall, fit, in an expensive suit that fit him perfectly like a second skin, with a phone in his hand that seemed to cost more than a whole month of my staff's work, he instantly attracted attention. However, it wasn't so much his appearance that made me look up, as his aura, an elusive combination of lightness and unyielding confidence. He stepped up to the reception desk and, putting his phone away, looked at me, and at that moment I heard his voice for the first time, soft, smooth, like silk enveloping the space. "Good evening," he said, smiling, and it was such a disarmingly natural smile that I had to force myself to maintain my usual professional restraint. "I'm Ethan. I'll stay with you for a couple of nights. Is there anything interesting going on here?" I raised an eyebrow slightly, studying his face, trying to determine if there was more to this apparent lightness than just a cursory interest. His eyes were attentive, and although his tone sounded casual, I sensed that he really wanted to hear the answer. "The city is full of surprises," I said, smiling back, not expecting such a reaction from myself. "It all depends on what exactly you are looking for." I handed him the room key, and our fingers touched for a second. It might have been a casual gesture, but something inside me flinched. Our conversation was short and insignificant, but it left behind a strange feeling, as if something had already moved from its usual place. Maybe it was his sincere curiosity, or maybe it was that look that seemed to be trying to figure me out while I was talking. When he was leaving, I found a note he left on the counter. It was laconic, written in neat handwriting, and there was something hidden in those few words that made my heart skip a beat for a moment. "I enjoyed our conversation. I would like to continue it over dinner." I held the note in my hands, reading it over and over again, feeling the fluctuations inside me. It wasn't the first guest who showed interest in me, but before that I always kept my distance, not allowing outsiders into my life. Work was the main thing for me, that's what defined me. But something about Ethan was breaking out of the usual rhythm, something in his manner of speaking, in his gaze hinted that perhaps the risk was justified. We met in a small, cozy restaurant hidden on one of the side streets, where the dimmed lights and the soft hum of voices created the illusion of privacy. There has always been a special charm in this place. It attracted people who were looking not just for food, but for an atmosphere, a feeling as if you had momentarily escaped from the ordinary. When he saw me, his smile widened, and I found myself thinking that I was pleased to be the object of this reaction. "You've really set this place up in your own way," he said, looking around. "Or did this place set you up?" I laughed, surprised at how easy it was for me to be with him. "You could say that I've had practice," I replied as we sat down at the table. The dinner time flew by unnoticed. We talked about everything and nothing, discussed travel, books, even funny incidents from life, and the longer our conversation lasted, the more I realized that he was not at all what he seemed at first glance. Yes, he was confident in himself, his voice sounded calm and measured, and his movements were precise and smooth, but behind this outward ease there was a depth not peculiar to a man accustomed only to take from life. When the conversation turned to me, I suddenly opened up to myself more than I was used to. I told him about the loss of my parents, how from the age of 21, all the responsibility for my younger sister Mia fell on my shoulders, about how I learned to cope with it, balancing caring for her and the need to survive in a world that did not give indulgences. "It's a heavy burden, Abigail," he said, and there was something like genuine admiration in his eyes. "You must be incredibly strong." I shrugged, not used to such compliments. "We all play with the cards we get," I said, hiding my gaze. "Mia was my priority. Our parents left us something, and I tried to be careful with it, gradually developing what we had. He nodded, his face thoughtful. It's impressive. You have a good head on your shoulders. I felt a smile touch my lips. His words sounded simple, but there was real respect in them. However, when I tried to find out more about him and his family, he skillfully got off the subject. My people and I, let's just say we have different views on life, he said, and for a second his voice became a little tougher, and a shadow flashed across his face. They have their own ideas, I have mine. I sensed something more in those words than just family differences, but I decided not to insist. Each of us has our own stories, our own scars, which we are not always ready to reveal to strangers. When the evening came to an end, I suddenly realized that I didn't want it to end. There was something about Ethan that made me feel alive, reminded me of what it was like to enjoy the moment, just to be here and now, not thinking about tomorrow. And perhaps it was from that moment on that my life began to change, turning into a maelstrom of events from which it was impossible to break away. Every moment with Ethan turned into something more than just an ordinary moment. He seemed to be rewriting the roles of life, turning routine events into enchanting performances in which I was not just a spectator, but the main character, surrounded by attention, warmth, and the dazzling light of his energy. Even an ordinary dinner in our favorite cafe, small, cozy, with soft lamplight and a quiet hum of conversations around, became unforgettable, filled with sincere words, laughter, and tenderness. Ethan, I still can't believe how fast everything is moving, I confessed one evening, lightly clutching a cup of fragrant cappuccino, trying to focus on something tangible to calm the strange feeling of dizziness that arose whenever I thought about us. He looked at me, and there was not a shadow of doubt in his gaze, only absolute confidence, the kind that makes words weighty and actions meaningful. He reached across the table and took my hand in his, running his fingers lightly over my skin, and the gesture sent shivers down my spine. When something seems right, why delay? His voice was low, enveloping, and I could feel his words slowly seeping into the very depths of my consciousness. I've never been so sure of anything in my life as I am of you. I lowered my eyes, feeling two worlds collide inside me, one in which the rules dictated caution, where everything had to be weighed and analyzed, and the other in which there were only feelings, only his warm palms, tenderness in his voice, light in his eyes. I know, it's just that everything happens so fast, I said, as if trying to explain to myself what exactly is bothering me. There's too much to process, to wrap my head around, to understand. He squeezed my hand tighter, and this simple but confident gesture became something more than words, became a fulcrum in the midst of a whirlpool of thoughts and feelings. I understand, he nodded, his gaze serious and gentle at the same time, but trust me, Abigail, I'm here for a long time. I want to build a life with you, a future, and I want to start by making our wedding day the most memorable day of our lives. When he talked about the wedding, his voice was filled with passion and confidence, as if he had already seen the whole picture in front of him, and it was impossible not to be infected by his enthusiasm, not to feel the wave of his dreams overwhelm me. He painted a picture of a day so magnificent, so perfect, that it took my breath away. Imagine, Abigail, his eyes shone as he spoke, a ceremony that no one can forget, a celebration of our love filled with splendor, warmth, and joy. It's going to be a perfect day. I listened to him, and two forces were fighting in me. One was caution, the need to stay on earth. The second was an irrepressible desire to trust, believe, allow myself to be a part of this fairy tale, where I am a princess, and he is a man who can move mountains for me. And the honeymoon. I tilted my head, studying his expression. Were you talking about the most expensive hotel in the world? His smile widened, and there was a mischievous sparkle in his eyes. Yes, it's all part of the plan, he said with a slight playfulness, but there was seriousness in his voice. But I need you to trust me, to make this leap with me. He was talking about a dream that we had to put everything into, my savings for the wedding, his funds for the honeymoon and our future home, and his words sounded so convincing, so right, that I could only look into his eyes, full of love and promises, and, despite my hesitation, nod in agreement. "Okay, Ethan," I said, feeling something inside me give in to the urge, "let's do this. Let's make our wedding an unforgettable day." And from that moment on, our life turned into a whirlwind of preparation, where the days followed each other so quickly that I couldn't keep track of time. Ethan was a man of action, someone who didn't just talk, but turned what he said into reality. He took care of every detail, controlled every little thing, ensuring that everything would be perfect, that our day would not just be a celebration, but a real spectacle that everyone would remember. I watched him, his energy, how he literally glowed with enthusiasm, and every time my heart was filled with something unknown, something that was becoming more and more like love every day. "Ethan, you're amazing," I told him one evening as we were going through the guest list, discussing the sumptuous menu he had planned. "The way you handle everything. I don't even know how to thank you." He pulled me into his arms, and I felt my heart thumping in my chest. "Abigail," his voice sounded close to my ear, and the simple sound sent a shiver through my body. "Seeing you happy is all I need. This wedding is just the beginning, and our life together will be even more wonderful." I believed him, I believed in his words, I believed in his confidence. But somewhere deep inside, in the silence of the night, when everything became too quiet, shadows of doubt crept in. I found myself wondering if we were moving too fast. Are you getting too carried away with this whirlwind of romance? Am I losing sight of something important? But every time the doubts raised their heads, his words, his touches, his confidence dispelled them, like the morning wind dispersing the night fog. He was my anchor, my light, my guide in this whirlwind of events. And as I looked at him, at his smile, at that fire in his eyes, I couldn't help but feel that maybe I was really on the verge of something truly great. Wedding preparations completely captured my days, turning them into a series of endless meetings, calls, approvals, and choices, where every decision, from the shade of the tablecloths to the shape of the wedding cake, took on significance, as if these were not just details of the celebration, but key elements of a huge mosaic that formed the future. But in the midst of all this maelstrom of decisions and worries, I realized that I needed someone close to me, someone who knew me better than anyone else, who understood me without words, could catch my every mood and support me if the ground suddenly began to give way under my feet. I needed Mia, my younger sister, my closest person, my support ever since we were left alone against the whole world, when we lost our parents. I called her, hoping that she would be able to carve out at least some time for me among her work at the cafe, where she worked endless shifts, covering her palms with the aromas of freshly brewed coffee and sweet pastries. "Hey, Mia, do you think you can give up aprons and coffee smells for tulle and satin today?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound joking, but there was clearly hope in it, because this day, connected with choosing a dress, seemed impossible to me without her. I heard her laugh on the phone, light, familiar, and so familiar that I felt the tension ease from my shoulders as soon as I heard it. "For you, sis." Her voice was warm, full of genuine affection. "I am ready to exchange coffee stains for wedding plumes any day. Give me an hour to finish here, and I'm all yours." The wedding salon looked like a fairy tale palace, filled with white and cream fabrics, airy silhouettes, silk shimmers, the play of light on shiny jewelry, beaded bodices, and long, flowing folds that streamed down like waterfalls, covering the floor with soft waves. There was a special atmosphere in this place, the expectation of a miracle, the anticipation of magic, the moments when dreams come true, when a girl becomes a bride, and the dress is a reflection of her very soul. As I walked out of the fitting room, feeling unusually vulnerable in that white cloud of fabric, I searched Mia's eyes, knowing that her reaction would be the main answer for me. "Abigail," she gasped, her eyes flashing with delight, reflecting something that made me smile. "It's like it was made for you." I turned to the mirror, studying my reflection. The dress fit perfectly, hugging every curve, emphasizing the waist, gently falling down with the thinnest fabric, in which it seemed that the light was refracted, creating the impression of something weightless, almost ethereal. "You think so?" I asked, catching myself that the excitement in my voice was making it a little quieter. I feel, I don't know, like a real bride. I smiled at my reflection, and Mia smiled back at me, but at that moment, for a split second, I noticed a shadow flit across her face, quick, subtle, but palpably disturbing. "Are you okay?" I started, but she quickly shook her head, not letting me finish, and stepped to the hangers, snatching out one of the dresses, turning it in front of her with a light movement. "Do you think if I give this a chance, just for a joke?" She looked at me defiantly, lifting her dress to shoulder level, which seemed to catch the light with every movement, soft golden reflections running through the fabric, making it look like liquid gold. I laughed, a sound that came out unexpectedly, filled with a mixture of surprise and delight. "Planning an escape, sis? Or maybe there's a mysterious man you've been hiding from me all this time?" Her laugh sounded in response, but there was a strange note in it, light, almost imperceptible, but still different from the usual ringing and carefree tone. "Oh, Abigail," she waved her hand, pretending that my words were something completely ridiculous. "You know me. I'm always a bridesmaid, never a bride. But can't a girl dream?" She smiled, but the moment her gaze darted away from mine, I felt that she was hiding something more than just a momentary weakness or a sudden desire to try on a dress. The day dragged on with a mixture of laughter and silken whispers, but as it drew to a close, I felt more and more that something had changed. Mia, always so light, so sincere and lively, suddenly became distracted, as if her thoughts were slipping somewhere far away, to a place where I couldn't reach them. "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked when we left the salon, unable to stand the growing anxiety. She froze for a second and then quickly waved her hand, as if erasing my worries, making them insignificant. "Really, nothing special." Her voice sounded too light, too casual, just chaos in the cafe, you know how it happens. But her tight smile never reached her eyes. I wanted to believe that it was just fatigue, just pre-wedding stress, or maybe trouble with one of the clients, but something inside me tightened with anxiety. Some small voice inside told me that this was something more than just a difficult day. And that night, as I lay in bed, replaying the moments of the day over and over in my head, when I tried to see that strange glimmer of anxiety in her eyes again, when I heard in my memory the slight but unnatural tension in her voice, the feeling of joy associated with finding the perfect dress was suddenly overshadowed by a new feeling, the feeling that something is slipping away, something is happening right in front of me, but I still don't understand what exactly. She was the only person I could always read like an open book. I could tell by the slightest movement of her eyebrows, by the tone of her voice, by the way she bit her lip when she was hiding something. But now it was like there was a wall between us, and behind that wall there were pages that I could no longer make out. Words hidden from me, carried out of my field of vision. As the wedding approached, the joy I was supposed to feel faded, colored by anxiety, disturbing shadows that crept into my mind, but I didn't know what exactly to be afraid of. I didn't know that just one moment, one accident, or maybe not such an accident, would turn my world upside down. It was an ordinary day, one of those when the endless chores of preparing for a wedding consume thoughts, when plans, lists, calls become the only reality, but even in the hustle of that day, something in the air seemed different, somehow condensed, foreshadowing a thunderstorm. I cleaned the apartment, getting used to the idea that it would soon cease to be just mine, that Ethan, with all his ideas, habits, and energy, would become an integral part of my life. But all these thoughts crumbled as soon as I noticed his phone left on the kitchen table. It vibrated over and over, emitting persistent notifications like little ghostly chimes counting down the seconds before my world would collapse. I tried not to pay attention, because everyone has a personal space, and I was not one of those who broke into it for no reason, but this importunity, this strange rhythm with which one message replaced another, filling the screen with short lines, it did not give me peace. It pulled on invisible threads. My anxiety until I succumbed. The phone was not locked. That in itself was already strange. But it was nothing compared to what I saw inside. The messages between Ethan and Mia hit me like a punch in the gut, each word hitting my heart, making my blood run cold as I read them over and over again, not believing what I was seeing. It wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy, a carefully planned betrayal, in which I was not just a victim, I was just a means, a stepping stone that they were going to use and then discard as an unnecessary thing. I can't believe we handled this. She's such a fool, she falls for every lie. And now, with the baby, we can finally be together, as planned. My vision blurred, the letters blurred, but I continued to read until something painfully sharp squeezed in my chest, leaving me neither air nor strength. Mia was pregnant with Ethan's baby. Every new word felt like a knife stabbing deeper, and all the years that Mia and I held onto each other, all the moments, all the promises and endless conversations, it all crumbled, turning into mud under their feet. She's just a naive cash cow. I can't wait to get rid of her and start our real life together. This wedding will be perfect because of her money. Those words belonged to Ethan. Not Mia, but him. And if my sister's betrayal could still leave room for pain in me, then his words, his calculation, his confidence that I was so stupid that I would not see, would not understand that I would allow myself to be used, they left no room for pain. Just for the rage. A storm of emotions raged inside me, overflowing, fighting for dominance, disappointment, anger, horror, but through this chaos, an icy determination slowly but surely broke through. Did they think they could use me, that they could betray me in the most terrible way and go unpunished? Did they think I would let them ruin my life, trample on everything that was important to me, and walk away holding hands? They underestimated me. I'll show them the price of betrayal. I'll show them who Abigail Anderson really is. When Ethan returned, his demeanor was carefree, relaxed, and it made me cringe. Now I knew that there was a lie behind his smile, that his touch was nothing more than a mask, that every word he said to me had a completely different meaning. "Hey, baby, did I miss any important calls?" "What is it?" he asked, coming up to me and casually picking up the phone. I forced a smile. "No, just the usual stuff." "It's been a busy day," I said in a flat voice, suppressing the emotions rushing out inside me. He smiled, the same smile that used to make my heart skip a beat, but now I saw it differently. "But there's nothing more important than getting back to you," he said, leaning down to kiss me. I had to force myself not to recoil. From that moment on, I played the role. I was smiling. I nodded. I agreed with every wedding plan he had. I let him think he was still in control. But behind the scenes, I was making my own plans. I was planning to take revenge on two people who betrayed me in the most terrible way. Every day that passed was a test of my will, every moment was a battle between the role I had to play and the rage that boiled inside me, corroding from the inside out, making me clench my fists when no one was looking and smile when they were waiting for it. But I didn't let myself break down. I didn't let these two see how my heart was breaking, how deception, betrayal, and pain were bubbling inside, turning into a force that moved me, filled me with icy determination. I waited, played my role flawlessly, knowing that the day would come when the masks would fall off, and then they would learn the true cost of their betrayal. They would learn that their carefully woven web of lies would turn into a trap from which there would be no way out. And every night, as I lay in bed, looking into the darkness, where the pale light of the lanterns filtered through the thin curtains, their faces rose up in front of me again and again, deceitful, treacherous, filled with the same feigned warmth that I believed in, that I allowed myself to believe in. I heard their voices in my head, reread the messages in my mind, saw their future, which they dreamed of, a future in which I had no place. And I made a vow to myself, silent, cold, unshakable, that they would pay for everything they had done, that their sweetly constructed conspiracy, their perverted game, would turn into the most terrible catastrophe for them. I was no longer the one who was betrayed. I was the one who was going to destroy them, carefully, methodically, with impeccable precision. The days before the wedding dragged on like something surreal. Everything looked perfect, every detail was thought out: flowers, decorations, seating arrangements, immaculately chosen dress. Everything seemed to be the epitome of perfect preparation for the celebration of love. But behind this dazzling picture a storm was brewing, and I, the one who kept this storm in check, lived, feeling something throbbing in the depths of me, a kind of anticipation. Ethan was himself, unfailingly confident, serene, passionate about this wedding and how grand it was going to be, how everyone in town was going to talk about it. "Abigail, everything is going so well," he said one evening, as we were reviewing the final preparations, his voice filled with enthusiasm, sincerity, which now seemed to me just a well-played role. "This wedding will be a topic of conversation for many years to come." I nodded, smiled, rehearsed, flawlessly, so that he wouldn't guess anything. Yes, I agreed, and there was a hidden meaning in my words that he couldn't understand. It will be a day that will be remembered. Mia was a different story. It was harder with her because she was my sister, the person I would have given everything for, who I protected, who knew me better than anyone else, and now, looking at her, I had to remind myself who she had become for me. Alien. A traitor. The one who stood next to me, smiled, said the usual things, but whose words and gestures now cut me like a knife. "Abigail, you're doing so well," she said one day when we were checking the seating arrangements, and there was something strange in her voice, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was saying. "I do not know how you do it." I looked at her face, in which I now saw not memories of childhood, not traces of our common life, but only lies that she tried to conceal. "Oh, Mia," I let myself laugh, easily, sincerely, as much as I could play it. "You know, I've always had a penchant for organizing chaos." And how ironic it was to say those words, knowing that the chaos they created was already under my control. As the wedding day approached, the tension grew. It was palpable in the air, in the little things, in the way Ethan began checking his phone more often, as his conversations became quieter, shorter, more hurried, but now it didn't matter. I knew enough. I've seen enough. And then the day came. The morning turned out to be clear and bright, the way a wedding morning should be, the way they probably imagined it, not knowing that this day would be the end for them. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection, seeing an impeccable picture of the bride, calm, serene, the embodiment of happiness. But under the veil, under the flawless makeup, was not the Abigail they knew. There was a woman who had gone beyond their game, a woman who would no longer be a pawn. "I'm late, huh?" Ethan said, coming into the room, straightening his tie, his voice full of confidence. He didn't even know he was so calm. I met his gaze in the mirror, carefully hiding the excitement, anger, and cold calculation that boiled inside me, replacing them with indifference. "Yes, but she'll be here," I replied in a flat voice, watching how his expression remained unchanged, how he didn't even notice the double meaning of my words. "She wouldn't miss it for the world." He nodded, smiling absently, completely confident that everything was going according to plan. "Well, she's always been a little unpredictable," he remarked, fastening his cufflinks. "But today it's about us, Abigail. About our new beginning." I smiled again. Because he didn't know yet. But it really was the beginning. Just not for us. I turned to him, letting my gaze linger on his face a little longer than usual, as if absorbing every detail, his smug smile, the confidence that he holds all the threads of this performance in his hands, his eyes filled with what I once took for love, but what really it was nothing more than a reflection of his own ego. My smile was flawless, honed to perfection, a masterpiece of self-control, a mask that hid a hurricane of emotions, held by me with cold-blooded precision. "Yes, Ethan, a new beginning," I said, filling every word with a meaning he couldn't understand. And when I took a step forward, when I walked down the aisle between the rows of guests, catching their gazes on me, warm, filled with joy, expectation, admiration, I knew that this was the last moment of calm before the storm, the last second when they believed in a fairy tale that was about to shatter. A doomed wedding, a doomed love, doomed destinies. The altar was in front of me, glowing in the soft candlelight, and the priest was already preparing to begin the ceremony. I stood next to Ethan. I heard the guests holding their breath, as someone wiped away a tear. Feeling emotional, everything was ready, the stage was set, and the truth was ready to collapse, like the wreck of a great ship. The priest opened his mouth to utter the first words, but did not have time, because at that moment the door of the hall abruptly opened, and the voice that I had known since childhood cut through the air, cutting it like the tip of a dagger. "Step aside, Abigail," Mia said, stepping inside, her voice not trembling, her posture straight, and her gaze determined, but not with the love with which sisters usually look at each other, but with the cold firmness of a man who is ready to fight for his own. She was wearing a wedding dress almost identical to mine, white, flowing in waves like a mirror image, an inverted, ugly parody of my destiny that they were trying to steal. The guests gasped, and someone turned to their neighbor, whispering in shock, but no one dared to speak out loud. "I'm the one who deserves to be here," Mia continued, taking another step, her eyes darting to Ethan and then back to me. "Ethan loves me. And this baby I'm carrying is his." She pronounced these words clearly, squeezing each letter so as not to leave anyone in doubt, and the air in the hall seemed to become thicker. Tension vibrated in every molecule, in every look directed at me. There were whispers and gasps of surprise in the room, and the guests looked at each other, their faces reflecting pure confusion, clearly unable to comprehend the scene that was unfolding in front of them. But the worst part was that Ethan didn't look surprised or guilty. He didn't try to hide anything, didn't even pretend that it was a mistake, that it was some kind of madness. Instead, he laughed. A pure, sincere, frank laugh that cut through the tense silence like a knife. "Well said, Mia," he chuckled, turning to me with that charming smile that once made me believe him. "Abigail, you've been a good hostess, but that's where your role ends. Why don't you join the audience?" He made a wide gesture with his hand, inviting me to leave. Contempt sparkled in his eyes, confidence that he had won, that everything was going as he had planned. Now it's Mia's time. Their audacity, their cruelty, their absolute confidence in their victory, all this caused a new wave of shock in the crowd, but no one, not even me, expected what followed next. I slowly looked first at Ethan, then at Mia, allowing a moment of silence to hang between us, giving them a chance to realize the moment, to fill it with anticipation of their victory. And then I smiled. "Sure, why not?" I said calmly, in an even voice, without giving a single hint of what was on my mind. "I wouldn't want to miss the show. After all, I paid for it." My words swept through the hall like an inaudible wave, and suddenly, as if on cue, the whispers rose, intensified, and overwhelmed the crowd. The guests were darting glances from me to them, trying to figure out what was going on and, most importantly, why I was so calm. But the real reaction I was expecting wasn't from them. I noticed how Ethan and Mia exchanged glances, how their self-confidence gave a tiny crack, as they realized that my answer was not what they expected. Abigail Anderson, the woman they tried to make a mockery of, the woman they betrayed, the woman they left the role of a broken victim to, sat in the front row among the guests, my head held high, without the slightest trace of defeat in my eyes. The whispers grew louder and louder. The guests were talking among themselves, not understanding what was happening, but I remained unperturbed, a statue in the midst of chaos, motionless, confident, knowing that now I was in control of this performance. Ethan shifted his weight from one foot to the other, giving me a look that looked like concern. "What's your game, Abigail?" "What is it?" he finally asked, trying to maintain his usual nonchalance, but his voice faltered. "Why are you so calm?" I met his gaze, slowly tilting my head to the side, allowing him to see something in my eyes that he could never have expected. I smiled. The real show was just beginning. I met his gaze, my smile remained flawless, did not flinch for a moment, did not betray a drop of emotions that were bubbling inside, because now there was no place for them, now I had to remain cold as marble and indestructible as a rock. No game, Ethan, I said, letting my voice sound soft, almost lazy, but there was hidden venom in every word, covered in a velvety smoothness. I'm just enjoying the fruits of your labor. Please continue. I can't wait to see how it all ends. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms in my lap, and judging by the way Ethan clenched his jaw and the faintest hint of annoyance flashed in his eyes, my behavior unsettled him, made him nervous. The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere changed. She was no longer filled with joyful anticipation, that light glow of emotion that usually envelopes weddings. No, now the air was thick, filled with tension, as if before a thunderstorm, as if every person in the hall, from the priest to the occasional waiter, realized that they had become not just guests at the celebration, but spectators, unwitting participants in the drama that had just begun. They didn't know if they were witnessing a wedding or a prelude to disaster, but they knew one thing: they didn't want to look away. When Mia and Ethan began to pronounce their vows, their words sounded like mockery, empty, lifeless, not at all like those vows that should seal eternity. They sounded fake, deceptive, just like everything in this story, just like this wedding itself, built on lies and betrayal. I looked at them, at this travesty of marriage, and a triumphant premonition flared up inside me, because I knew that this was just the beginning. They thought that today was their triumph, but in fact they secured seats in the front row for their own downfall. And then a voice rang out. Loud, hard, with a hint of rage that was impossible not to hear. Stop this wedding right now. The door swung open with a bang, and a woman, older and more exhausted than either of them, stepped inside, her eyes burning, flashing with anger. Her posture was like that of a person who had nothing more to lose. Ethan's face turned ashen, his eyes widened, and his mask, so carefully held all this time, began to crack. Catherine? His voice broke, and there was horror, confusion, and fear in it. What are you doing here? She didn't pay the slightest attention to his words. I'm here to stop you from doing something even more stupid than what you've already done. Her voice was loud, confident, giving no room for objections. And Abigail, you deserve to know the truth. She looked at me with sympathy, with regret, but it didn't matter anymore. I already knew everything. There was a growing hum of voices in the hall. The guests whispered to each other, shocked by the scandal unfolding in front of them. Bewilderment could be seen in their eyes. Their faces were full of thirst to find out the details, because they felt that what was happening now would outshine any soap opera, any drama they had ever seen. Mia clutched her stomach, her face contorted. She turned pale, as if she suddenly realized that the ground was falling out from under her feet. But Catherine didn't stop. Ethan is a liar and a fraud. Her voice cut through the silence, exposing the truth like a surgical scalpel. He's up to his ears in debt, his investments failed, and he used you all to get out of a hole he dug himself. There was movement in the hall. Someone stood up, someone clutched at his mouth, unable to believe what he had heard. And Mia, poor girl, Catherine continued, turning to her with a hint of pity in her eyes. You're just another pawn in his game. The hum of voices turned into real chaos. The guests got up from their seats. Someone tried to shout at Ethan. Someone whispered with the neighbors, discussing the shocking revelation. Ethan darted his gaze around the room. His lips moved. He tried to speak, but the words were drowned in the noise. I stood up, letting my dress slide gently across the floor, and then I spoke, and my voice instantly silenced everyone. There's something else, I said, and the room was deathly silent. Everyone turned to me, even Ethan and Mia, even Catherine, and now they were looking at me like a judge, like an executioner holding the final verdict in his hands. I took a step forward, my eyes burning with a cold light. After I found out about you too, I hired a private investigator. I let these words settle down, give them weight. And what did he find? That Ethan is not only already married and drowning in debt, but also hiding his daughter. Fear showed on Mia's face. Daughter? Her voice broke, and she balled her fingers into a fist. That's not true. "Ethan, tell me she's lying." She begged him, but her voice was empty, her hope already crumbling. Ethan was pale as a ghost, his lips pressed into a thin line. He was looking at me, and I could see that he had no excuses, no lies, no escape routes left. But it wasn't over yet. I took another step. And now, my voice was icy, but there was a triumphant note in it. "It's time to meet your parents, Ethan." The doors of the hall opened again, and two people entered, an elderly man with a cold look and a woman whose face was a frozen mask of disappointment. "I contacted them and told them everything," I said, enjoying the moment. "And now they are here to look into the eyes of the son who has disgraced their name." There was absolute silence. Ethan closed his eyes. He knew the game was over. Ethan's father, a tall, imposing man whose bearing spoke of years of discipline and authority, rose from his seat, and when he spoke, his voice was like a thunderclap echoing off the walls. There was more than just anger and disappointment in his tone. There was something final in those words, like a stone falling into the depths of a bottomless well. "Ethan, you're not my son." He said it with such cold determination that even my skin crawled. "Your actions today and in the past have shown your true character. You were cut off from our family and our heritage." The room froze. The hum of voices instantly subsided, and in the resulting silence, I heard someone gasp softly, as someone fidgeted nervously, but no one said a word. I turned my gaze to Ethan, watching as his face, which had just been filled with self-confidence and audacity, slowly and inevitably lost all color, turning into a pale, devastated mask. Mia was standing next to him, her fingers clenched into fists, and her eyes were frantically darting around the room like an animal trapped in a trap. She was looking for a way out. She was looking for someone to save her. But there was no way out. I looked at both of them, at their shattered dreams, at their attempt to build happiness on the foundation of deception and betrayal. The pain was still throbbing inside me, reverberating through every cell of my body, but standing there amidst the ruins of what was supposed to be my happiest day, I knew that this was not the end of my story. That was just the beginning. After all this, I found myself in the cold, soulless halls of justice, demanding compensation for the damage caused to me. Now our war has gone beyond private intrigues. Now it was conducted in the language of legal documents and formalities, where emotions were reduced to cold facts, and personal pain was translated into figures and articles of the law. The courtroom seemed to me to be a completely different world, a place where the humiliation that I had endured, the pain that I had experienced, turned into legal terms, into dry words of a statement of claim, into obligations and compensation. "Ethan," my voice was steady, firm, and I looked him straight in the eye, not giving him a single chance to hide from the truth. "You not only broke your promise, but also broke my trust, abused my generosity, and tried to use me for your own gain. You owe me more than just an apology. You owe me compensation for turning my life upside down." My words hung in the air, biting into the walls, and the judge, a stern man with deep-set eyes, nodded slightly, then raised a hammer and slammed it on the table, voicing the final verdict. The court decides in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant undertakes to pay $50,000 in compensation for moral damage, as well as to cover financial losses caused by his actions. His words came out of the blue, but for me they became something more than just a legal verdict. They were a symbol of justice. A small victory that didn't erase the pain, but made it more bearable. When I left the courtroom, for the first time in a long time, I felt that the burden that had been weighing on me all these months had become lighter. But Ethan's problems were just beginning. Catherine, his legal wife, the woman who stood up that very day to reveal the truth, wasn't going to stop. Fueled by pain and rage, she began her own legal battle, demanding compensation for his infidelity, for neglecting their daughter, for the ruined life he left behind when he decided to seek a better life. Now, the once confident, self-confident, competent man found himself entangled in his own web of lies, and his past deeds began to overtake him, destroying everything he was trying to build. And Mia. Mia was left alone. She left Ethan when she realized that he had no one else to rely on, when she realized that he would not save her, would not ensure her happy life, would not fulfill any of those promises that he so easily threw away. One day she came to me. I remember that evening. I remember her standing on my doorstep. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face was pale, her hands were shaking. "Abigail," she said, her voice weak and desperate, and she looked at me as if she hoped to see a glimmer of sisterly love in my eyes. "I know I have no right to apologize to you, but I'm lost. I do not know what to do." I was looking at her. Once upon a time, I would have done anything for her. Once upon a time, I would have thrown the whole world at her feet just to save her from pain. But now, "You were my family, my blood," I said, and my voice wasn't cruel, it was just tired, empty. "But what you did, it's not something I can just forget or forgive." Mia lowered her head, tears glistening on her eyelashes. "You chose your path," I continued. "And now you have to follow it. Just like I'm going my own way." We stood like that for a few more seconds, but there was nothing between us anymore, just emptiness, a chasm too wide and too deep to cross. She turned around and left, and I didn't even look after her. Life went on. The scars that remained after those months did not disappear, they were still with me, but I learned to live with them. I focused on rebuilding my life, on finding peace in simple things, in a cup of morning coffee, in the sound of rain outside the window, in books that I now read not to escape from reality, but to believe in it again. I've loved and lost. She trusted and was devoted. But despite all that, I survived. I've become stronger. And looking back at everything that happened, I realized one simple truth: the most important journey is not the road leading to revenge, nor the path that runs through courtrooms. The real journey is the way inside yourself. A journey of healing. The journey of restoring one's strength. A journey of learning how to trust again and how to love again.